on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today I've got a requested magic review for you. Several people have asked me to review this any card at any number effect by Steve Gore, which is called TAKAAN, or the any card at any number effect. Now, those of you who have watched my channel for any length of time know that I'm a big fan of the any card at any number effect. I've done a lot of reviews on it. I've even put out my own version. So I was really excited to see what Steve Gore brought to the table, as he's put out other products in the past, like the GPS deck, which were really good. So before I start, I wanted to let you guys know that I have no disclosures. No one sent this to me. This review is based on my own opinions and my own experiences using this. So for $25, you can pick this up from Penguin Magic. You're going to get over 2 hours of video instruction, where you're going to learn the main any card at any number effect, which Steve Gore calls pure gold. You're also going to learn 6 versions of a card at any number effect, which he also goes over. He teaches you how to make the gaff or the gimmick that you need to perform these effects, and he has like an hour-long session with his friend Matt Daniel Baker, where he basically goes over the explanations. You're going to see a bunch of live performances of all of these routines, and most of them are done with Steve's dad. Nothing wrong with that, of course. And he does give you 5 live performances of the pure gold any card at any number effect. He also goes over his own square stack as well, if you're interested in that. So that's pretty much what you're going to get. As usual, I'm going to try to go through this, give you guys a good idea of what you're going to learn here. I'm going to go over the positives and the negatives, my own impressions from road testing this over the past couple of weeks at work, as well as my own rating and recommendations for you guys. We're going to start out, though, with the ad copy, because there are several inconsistencies here, and I want to make sure you guys understand what you're getting. So the first line basically says, "At last, the real any card at any number with your regular deck." So that's really not true. It's not any card at any number. It's any one of 50 cards at 50 numbers is the reality of what it is, because 2 of the cards are disqualified by this method, and it's because of the method. So it's not really any card, unfortunately. So that's not true. And they say with your regular deck. It's really not a regular deck. It's a highly gaffed card box. So you're not going to be able to give away the cards to your spectator when you're done, unless you're going to give them the cards without the box. In fact, you can't even really let them hold the cards in the box while you're performing it. Otherwise, they'll notice something's funny with it. If we continue reading here in the ad copy, it says no card memory work, which that's true, and that's probably the strongest aspect of this. No mental arithmetic. Well, I would argue that there's no difficult mental calculations, but you still have to be able to count. You have to do some counting, and you have to have a good grasp and concept of how the gaff works and its orientation. Otherwise, you're going to make a mistake, and the whole thing is just going to go south. So this is not in any way self-working. This is going to take a lot of effort and practice. I just want to make sure you guys understand that. This says no difficult sleights. Well, you're going to learn a displacement that's not difficult, just like you saw in the trailer. That was, the full performance that was put out on YouTube. But I will point out that in half of the live performances that Steve Gore did, he did use a pass. And it makes sense, because in some instances, it's not going to look good to do that displacement based on what you have to displace. So if you're really against any kind of sleight of hand, then you may not like this as well. If we continue looking at the ad copy, there are a myriad of quotations from famous magicians here, saying that this is absolute favorite any card at any number effect. But finally, we get near the bottom. Just supply your own regular deck of cards again and again. But then finally, the last line here, listen to this one. It says, tiny amount of DIY may be required and a printer. Yes, not a tiny amount, a good amount. You are going to have to gaff your card box. You're going to need a color printer, and you're going to need a second card box that you're going to destroy. So there's actually quite a bit of DIY, and if you are not a fan of DIY, then you may not like this project at all. So I just wanted to make sure you guys understood these inconsistencies that are in the ad copy. The instruction that you're going to get here is really divided in a couple of sections. There's a portion where you're going to learn how to make the gaff And he gives you a couple of different options of how to do that. Unfortunately, he does kind of delve into the idea of a spring flat box, but never really teaches you how to make it. It's not difficult, and all of this stuff is not like, it's not anything that's going to take a lot of time, but it is something you are going to have to construct yourself. There is an hour-long video where he basically goes through all of the routines with his friend Matt Daniel Baker, and he tries to explain to him in detail the system of how this works. And I kind of felt bad for his friend, because you could see that he looked like he was like a deer caught in the headlights. He was like kind of confused, because it does take a moment to really understand how the gaff works. Even though it's not really that difficult, you could kind of lose your place on it, because there is, like I said, counting and effort that is involved. So I'm going to first go over the card at any number effects that you're going to learn, and then after that we're going to talk about the pure gold effect. So the card at any number effects, there's 6 versions of them, and these are the standard versions that usually use 2 decks. And so these are all different variations of them. The first one is just called Simplicity, and this is your standard card at any number effect that uses 2 decks. You hand the spectator a deck, you ask him to think of a number, they tell you the number, you take out the cards that you're holding and you shuffle them up and let them select a card, and then they can count down to their number in the deck that they're holding onto, and then the cards match. So this is basically the same exact card at any number effect that you probably learned years ago. Probably the magician who made this famous was Al Baker in his effect that was called A Card and a Number, which he published in 1933, and it's still the best version of it. It does use a memorized deck though, and so those people that are against the memorized deck, or they don't want to learn a memorized deck, I would just urge you to learn a mathematical stack. There are various mathematical stacks out there where you could easily calculate the card at any position that somebody names, which doesn't require any real memory work. And that's so much better than using this highly gaffed version to be able to do this effect, because I think that using this method is overkill for such a simple effect. You could just use a mathematical stack, which is so much easier. And for those of you that are interested in that, there's a myriad of those that exist out there. I would just point you out to check out the John Cornelius card system. There's also another one in the Semi-Automatic Card Tricks Volume 7. So you can find them all over the place. So that's the first card at any number effect that you're going to learn. Then the second card at any number effect is called Simply Invisible, and that's probably the best routine on this whole project. And the reason I say that is because it's something that you can immediately use, and it's really easy, and it makes sense because you're going to, again, take out 2 decks of cards, you hand one to the spectator, you ask them to think of a number, and then you tell them that you've made a prediction in the deck that you're holding onto. You can take the cards out of the box, you can spread them and show them that there's one card that's face down. You don't even have to show them the card yet. You can put it on the table face down. You can let them count down to their number in their deck, and they'll see that the cards match. So obviously that uses the standard invisible deck, and just from my description, you could pretty much just go with that and use that. Such a simple, basic idea, but it's a really good idea. And on this instructional video, you're going to see Steve Gore perform that on stage. So that's the second routine. The third routine is called Intuition, and I thought this was a little bit convoluted. This routine, again, uses 2 decks, and after the spectator tells you their number, you're going to take out your deck, you're going to shuffle it, you're going to cut it into 4 piles, and then you're going to let them cut each pile themselves, and then you're going to show them that the card that they cut to on each pile, the first card is the color, the second is the suit, the third is the value, and the fourth one is the card that they're going to find when they take out the cards out of the deck they're holding onto and count down to their number. It's a real mouthful, and like I said, it's kind of procedure heavy and convoluted. I would never perform it, but that's the third card at any number effect on there. The fourth effect is called Double Digits, and this is a card at any number effect for 2 spectators. You're using, again, 2 decks. 2 people give you 2 numbers. They each make a selection, and then they count down to those numbers and find their selection. So it's just a 2-person version of the standard card at any number effect. The 5th routine is called Double TAKAAN, and this effect, again, uses 2 spectators and 2 decks, except the difference is that now you're going to have 1 spectator name a number, the other one's going to name a card, and then you're going to take out your deck, shuffle it up, have the person that named a number is going to make a selection, and the one that named a card is going to cut the deck, and where they cut, you make a number. So again, it's another effect that it's just a little bit too much procedure for my liking, but basically it's another double card at any number with 2 spectators. So I would never use it, but some people might like that. The last card at any number effect on here is called 4 of ACAAN, and this is a prediction type card at any number effect that uses, again, 2 decks. You give your spectator a deck, you ask them to name a number, you take out your deck, you shuffle it up, and you let them make 3 selections that you don't look at them, you just put them face down on the table. They can count down to their number, and they'll find that the card that they counted down to is the missing card for a 4 of a kind, because the 3 cards that they selected are 3 of a kind. So they're either like aces, kings, 3s, 4s, whatever you want them to be. So those are the card at any number effects that are included on this project. A lot of people will argue that a card at any number effect is the same as an any card at any number effect, and I would argue that that's really not true. Just because of all of the manipulation involved, it's just not as clean, doesn't look as good. It's really not exactly the same effect. So we're going to get into now what he calls the pure gold any card at any number, and that really is the routine of this project. So let's take a look at that now. All right, so as you probably watched the uncut trailer that Steve Gore put out, in this pure gold any card any number effect, you're going to be holding the box of cards. You're going to ask the spectator for a card and a number. You're going to write them down on a business card, and then you're going to take the cards out of the box. You're going to show them that all the cards are different, and then you're going to have them count down to their card. That is basically what you can expect this any card any number effect. And I'm going to go over the positives and the negatives and then my impressions here. The positives are that there is no memory work involved and that there are no difficult mental calculations. That's probably the beginning and the end of the positives of this effect. If we go into the negatives, the first really blatant negative is all of the restrictions that you're placing on your spectator, because when you present in any card and any number effect, the effect is magical because they could name any card and any number, but here you're restricting them to 1 out of 50. And even when you watch Steve Gore's performances, he also tries to restrict them to lower numbers. He tells them, think of any number from 1 to 52, but you may want to think of a lower number because you're going to have to count to it, but it's up to you. You can think of any number. So that feels restrictive. You've already lost the quality of magic there. And there's a good reason for that, because you're only using 50 cards. And so when you perform in any card any number effect, if it's a low number, you naturally have the spectator count off the top to get to their number. If it's a high number, usually what I do is I just have them count from the face down. I say, let's just start from the back, count 52, 51. But in this effect, because you're only using 50 cards, that is going to be a problem, and you're going to have to do mental calculations that he goes over if it's a really high number, and that is why he tries to restrict the spectator. So for me, that's a pretty big negative. Unfortunately, I don't like that at all, because I want the experience to be completely magical. Now, if we look at the biggest negative on this project, the biggest negative is the displacement, because it's unmotivated. There's no good reason for why you're doing that. Even watching Steve Gore perform, when you see that he says, oh, he takes the cards out and says, look, they're all different. Oh, I don't even want to touch them. Here, you take them, you count down. Well, you did touch them. Not just that, you also split the cards in a spot. They're going to see that. They're going to see that there's card handling involved. And so the problem with that is that I think that the core idea of this effect was a great idea, but the execution was not. So this did not culminate in a real workable and convincing any card any number effect, because you have to understand that when a person sees something, the more confident they are in the reality of what they're seeing, that's going to lead to a stronger notion of impossibility. So what I'm trying to say is that if you name a number in a card and I don't even touch the box, or I just take the cards out and hand them to you immediately, then when you think back, you're going to remember, oh yeah, he didn't even really touch the cards. But if I'm going through the cards and spreading them and all this stuff, that the person's going to remember that. They're not dumb. And as we get to my experiences, I'm going to give you guys an idea of what I experienced when I road tested this, okay? So other negatives I need to mention to you guys is obviously you are limited on your angles because of the gaff that you're using. So you have to be very careful that you don't flash. You can't have anybody behind you or even really next to you. And then the other really large negative, I think, for most people is going to be that this effect is going to require a lot of practice, and there is a lot of room for error because it relies on effort, because you're going to have a good understanding of how that gaff works, and you're going to have a good understanding of the orientation of it. You're going to have to practice, otherwise you're going to make errors, which leads me to the conclusion of, if you're going to use a highly gaffed method, do you want to use one that's going to require a lot of effort and practice? If that's the case, why don't you just use an any card, any number effect that doesn't use any gaffs or gimmicks, and one that's going to look ultra clean, because you're already putting in a lot of effort, you see? So for me, that's a really big negative, because if I'm going to use a highly gaffed version, I want it to do all of the work for me. I don't want to be doing a version that's going to go south on me because I didn't count the right place, or I lost my place on the gaff, or whatever you want to call it. So that's a really huge negative. And so those are really the really big negatives here on this project. And if I tell you guys about my own impressions from road testing this, I performed this a half a dozen times, and the reality is that most people, it fooled them badly. It really did, right? But in one instance, the spectator was not fooled at all. And it kind of surprised me just because they were very keen on what I did. They didn't actually say directly that I cut the cards, but they said, "Oh, I saw what you did there." And I was like, "Oh, really? What was that?" And they're like, "Oh, you moved my card to the right position." That's what they said. And so that leads me to this notion that, you know what, people aren't dumb. They are observant. They are seeing what is going on. So, you know, you can fool a lot of people with this, but you're probably not going to fool everybody most of the time like you want to, because the open displacement is exactly what it is. And I purposely did not use a pass because I wanted to do this with the no difficult slight version, just using the standard displacement. I wanted to see if it would really fool people. And for the most part, it fooled most people. But again, the issue is that it didn't fool everyone. And I can tell you guys that I have performed the any card at any number effect more than any other card plot ever. And the reality is very rarely has anyone ever called me out on any of the versions that I've ever road tested and used. And this is one of those versions that I was called out on. Even performing this just a half a dozen times, I was actually quite surprised and shocked, because I wasn't expecting that they were even going to notice that, especially because the first couple of performances I did, they just flew over people. They didn't notice at all. So if you get a very observant spectator, they may see exactly what you're doing. All right, let's get into my rating, and then I'm going to give you guys my recommendations. The rating for this project, for originality, I gave this 5 out of 5. I thought Steve Gore had a very original and novel idea. I thought it was very clever. In terms of the teaching, I would give that a 3 out of 5, and the main reason is because there are certain items that he really just touched on and could have explained a lot better, like when he talked about making a spring flat box. He could have actually taught how to do it, and he really didn't do that. In terms of practicality, I would give this effect a 1 out of 5 because of all of the restrictions, because it's a highly gaffed method that really is not going to be something that's going to be as practical as you would want it to be. And you are restricted in how you really perform it, because you are going to have to do it exactly as you see with the business card, because all of that relies on the method. In terms of compared with other any card, any number effects, I would say that I would say there are lots of different gaff versions that are much better than this, that are not going to require a lot of effort. And I would point you to check out my top 5 gaffed any card, any number effects review, because I went over a lot of them. And there are much better versions that are ungaffed as well, that I'm going to get to in a moment. In terms of audience reactions, I rated this as 3 out of 5 because it did fool almost everybody, but I did have one negative performance where the person realized exactly what was going on. And so having a failure for me just nixes it. It's not something I would mess with again. In terms of the price, you can see I rated it as 3 out of 5. So this gives us a final rating of 2.67 out of 5, which is a low rating, unfavorable, and I would not recommend that you pick this up. I think that if you're looking for a gaffed any card, any number effect, there are much better versions out there. So let's take a look at my recommendations for you guys. Starting out with number 1, we have my recommendation for the ungimmicked any card at any number effect. And this effect comes from Roberto Mancilla. This is called Eureka. You can find this in his book, Nipus. So this effect is going to require no memory whatsoever, and it is going to require a very minimal amount of calculations. I think there's just one calculation, which is extremely simple, but in return for that, you're going to have a completely ungaffed, ungimmicked, any card, any number effect that you can do whenever you like. And if you are curious, it is a variation of Barry Richardson's any card at any number effect, but it doesn't use any gaffs or gimmicks whatsoever. It's a great routine. It's actually really easy to perform. It's the type of any card at any effect routine that's not going to require any practice. You're going to be able to learn it and pretty much go out and perform it immediately. That's how easy it is to perform, which is why I'm recommending that here as like my number 1 recommendation for you guys. If you're looking for something that uses no memory, virtually no mental calculations, and it's easy to perform, that's what I would recommend to you guys, because it's a great routine and it fools people badly. The second recommendation I would have for you guys is to check out my top 5 gaffed any card at any number review, because I went over a whole series of gaffed any card any number effects, which I think all of them are superior to this effect. All of them are easier to perform. None of those require the effort that this is going to require on your part, where you're going to be very self-conscious because you're going to be worried that they're going to catch you staring at the box or something like that, or that you're going to get, you're going to flash, or any other myriad of issues that are going to come up with this, or you're going to miscount or something like that. So I would recommend that to you guys. And then finally, my last recommendation for you guys, if you're willing to put in some practice and some effort, I would offer up my own unbiased any card at any number effect, which I feel is the most workable, the cleanest, purest any card at any number effect that exists. And it's an effect that you can rely on and you can perform relaxed. Once you really learn it well, it will become your favorite any card any number effect. But again, it is going to require quite a bit of practice in the beginning. In fact, I'm going to leave you guys with a live performance of my own that I did over video chat about 2 years ago. This is a really old performance, but it's one of those performances that I had on video, so I thought I would share it with you guys. And you could see that I'm not moving quickly at all, and you'll see how amazed the spectator is. And you can see how this is the type of routine that I really like, just because the spectator is going to be really sure that what they're seeing is impossible. And that is really what you want to convey, because that really builds conviction in the effect, because you're trying to really present a magical experience with the spectator. You want them to walk away and see what I just saw was totally impossible. That was crazy. And this does fall into almost like the too perfect theory, right? Like it almost seems too perfect. But I always like the idea of sowing a seed of doubt in the spectator, which you telling them, oh, well, I just got lucky. I always like to leave the spectator at the very end with that thought, because they themselves are going to think back and they're going to think, well, maybe they did just get lucky. Just that little simple, plausible explanation, it leaves a little bit of doubt in their mind, but at the same time, they're going to realize that this is utterly impossible. And when they think back to, what did the magician do? He barely even touched the cards. He didn't do anything. He took the cards out of the box and counted down to my number. They're not going to have any good explanation for it. So ultimately, their brain is going to have to make that mental leap, that mental assumption. They're going to have to just accept it, even though they don't want to have to swallow it, which is just great. So anyway, I'm going to leave you guys with my performance. Thanks so much for tuning into my reviews. I hope this wasn't too long. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, just leave them below. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you on the next review. And what I'm going to ask you to do is this. I'm going to try to keep my hand in the frame the whole time so you can see the box, okay? I want you to think of a number from 1 to 52. Any number you like, from 1 to 52.
Okay.
All right? Okay, name the number from 1 to 52.
10.
What did you say, 10?
Yeah.
10. Okay, that's a great number. There's nothing wrong with that number. That's a perfectly good number. Okay, so here's my next question for you is this, Name any card in the deck that you like.
You can like it doesn't need to be like with 10 or like it needs to be a number.
It could be
Okay.
any card.
Queen of Diamonds.
Queen of Diamonds. Okay. And any reason why that's the card that you like, or you're just like, I just like that card?
It's because my mom is a queen and I don't know. I don't think of that.
That's just the card. That just happens to be the card that you happen to like, right? Right.
Yeah.
And you and I have not set up anything before with this, correct? Like that's the truth.
No.
That's the God honest truth, right? Right.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question I have for you. I'm going to take the cards out. Here's a question I have for you: is what do you think is the likelihood that your card would be here in the 10th position, right? What do you think the likelihood of that would be? Like, if we move 10 cards, what's the likelihood that your card, what was it again? The Queen of, what was it, Diamonds? Queen of Diamonds, right? Or was it? No, you said Diamonds. Didn't you? Or just say?
Oh yeah, I said
You said Diamonds, right? You said Queen of Diamonds. So what's the chances that the Queen of Diamonds would be if we move 10 cards? Watch it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Look, you see it's coming off the top. 7, 8, 9, 10. Queen of Diamonds.
Holy crap! Bro. How did you do that?
Did you see that? That's the effect. Any card at any number.
That's insane.